Please. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to share my view. Normally, talks on political issues in Chinese Assembly Hall are co-organized by the Civil Rights Committee, but this is actually by the Socio-Economic Affairs Committees. And I think it's actually quite rightly so, because this is about an economic issue. It's about job seeking and job creation for the political class. So my topic is actually proliferations of public offices and concentration of power. As you can see, that photo gives you basically a message. Please give me a job. Next, please. Now this is the Malaysian Cabinet after the so-called reshuffle. To me, the reshuffle is an utterly misdeforming word here. Because you look carefully, as Person just pointed out, that you do not have any changes. The only addition are the three gentlemen at the bottom. Next. Now, when you have adjustment in office holders and so on, reshuffle means movement, addition, and removal. Now, if you have only removal, we call it downsizing. If you have only addition, we call that expansion. So this is really expansion. It's not about reshuffle. Next, please. Okay, I would like to go back to the fundamental questions. I mean, I'm sure our fellow panelists, Professor Liew and Chin Tong, would go into the details. So I'll just keep my part briefly to the larger question here. Now, why do we actually need cabinet minister? The official reason that is to run the government. Because you have ministry, you have government agency, you need a political leader to run that. The unofficial reason is also to sustain government. In parliamentary system, you basically do not have a direct election of the government. It's indirectly through the parliamentary elections. In other words, a Prime Minister comes into power by enjoying the confidence of the majority members of the House. And so when he formed the teams have to be from the Parliament, mostly from the lower house, with some additions from the upper house. So that's actually a natural way that how political power sharing comes into picture. But even if you have a presidential system, sometimes that still happens. Even though the president would not need to appoint anyone from the Congress, but politically speaking, you may still need to appoint, reward your supporters, or to buy off your rivals. So that's actually the real reason. Now, why I stress this? Because I would like to invite you all to look at it this way. As a Prime Minister, to appoint the right person to vote, to run the country, to govern the country, that's the benefit. Now, but you have a cost. Sometimes you just need to appoint people who may not be so smart, who may not be so intelligent, but you need them because they're actually popular. They control certain constituency. You exclude them, you make them your enemy. So, people who get appointed on the second reason, you can consider that as a cost. In other words, you can think of it that this is a very rational economic decision that every Prime Minister needs to make. Whether or not they are conscious of that. Is to leave a legacy, to win the next election, you need to get the right people, you need to get capable people to run the country. Now, the capable people may not be popular enough to give you the support. So you need to compromise by getting some people who are popular but not capable. Okay, next please. So, what happened? Just look at the second column. In normal countries, there's actually a fixed size for the cabinet. Meaning that there's roughly a number everyone agreed upon and say how big the cabinet should be. In some countries, it's much more rigid. Some would actually have a bit of allowance. But it's roughly an idea to say you can't have any size you want. Now, so what happened then? The role for rewarding for buying off your supporters or potential challengers is limited. And so, when you look at the monetary question, how much you need to pay your minister, is actually controlled. You can't pay too much. And the weight of each minister, this is where I think there is a question that normally get ignored. It's fixed. Because imagine that you have 20 ministers in a cabinet. And cabinet is supposed to practice collective responsibility. And the Prime Minister is supposed just to be the first among the equals. So each of them would be 1 out of 20, 5% of the cabinet. Right? And the PM power is kind of fixed. I'm sure I've heard Chin Tong speaking on this before. He'll definitely go into the role between the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister in the Westminster system. So you basically have a way to check on in between the executive itself to make sure that the cabinet will not end up to be a disguise or a vehicle for personal dictatorship of the Prime Minister. Now, as I said earlier, this is normal countries. And we all know Malaysia is always unique, right? Even if we don't get into World Cup, we can still make news on World Cups. Okay, so you come back to the cabinet size, we are open. And therefore the room for rewarding is unlimited. Remember the slogan, endless possibilities? It applies here as well. So the payroll can be growing. And the figure calculated by Malaysian Cabinet is about 10 million per year to pay our minister and deputy minister. Now the weight of minister, if you can increase the size, of course each of them become less important. So it actually goes up. And if each of them become less important, the Prime Minister power, of course, goes up. Simple logic, right? Next. We have 35 ministers. And people have been asking and saying that this is criticizing and saying this is too big. But how big is big? There's no absolute way to tell how big is big. You can only do so by making comparison. So the time of Malay independence is around 10 members, I think, in the cabinet. 13. 13, thank you. So, if you want to compare, I offer you here Australia and Malaysia. I'm sorry it's too small, but that's really because we have so many ministries. Right? I try to arrange them in accordance to each other function, so you can actually see why do we actually have more ministers than otherwise. So you go by minister, prime minister, of course, is 1-to-1. Deputy, PM, again 1-to-1. Then we have minister, in the Prime Minister department, we have 10. You do not have anyone in Australia. Okay? They have Attorney General and Treasurer to sit in their cabinets. These are politicians, we don't have that. And then you go down basically quite similar, except somewhere, for example, you look at, on our side, Minister of Transport, of Works, of Rural and Regional Development. We have three ministers here. In Australia, they become Minister for Infrastructure and Regional Development, 1. Okay, we have Minister of Energy, Green Technology and Water, they don't have 1. We have Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, they don't have 1. In Economics Development, we have Minister of International Trade and Industry, Minister of Domestic Trade, Cooperatives and Consumerism. We have 2, they have Trade. Minister for Industry, Minister for Small Business, Minister for Trade and Investment. Then you go further down, we have Minister of Urban Well-being, Housing and Local Government near the bottom. They don't have any. We have Minister of the Federal Territories, they don't have any. So roughly that's what you can see. Now, to give you a sum up, we have 37 ministerial positions. Now we have only 35 because the Finance Ministry and the Education Ministry, we have 2 ministers. the Prime Minister, the Deputy Minister. They become the first minister, then you have the second minister. In Australia, they have 22 ministerial positions. They have only 19 ministers because you have the Deputy Minister also holding the portfolio for infrastructure and regional development. You have the AG also holding the portfolio for the arts. You have the Health Minister holding the portfolio for sport. Next. Well, if I had shown you that Australia can run the country with less minister, you probably would ask and say, yes, of course they have less population. They have only 24 million. Well, we have 30, so it's 80%. So there may be a case that why we need more, because in Malaysia we believe that, we Malaysians, we believe that the more people you have, then the more politicians you have. The size of the politician is a function of the size of the population. That's like parasites, you know. Okay? This is India. This one is India. And there's a whole list of them. That side is Malaysia, this side is India. You can see that India actually has a lot of things. For example, we have minister in the Prime Minister Department. They don't have anything like this. And I can probably tell this would have been in our PM department. They have individual ministry. Minister for Personal Public Grievances and Pensions. I think that's Idris Jala position, right? Minister of Economic Energy, we don't have that. Minister of Space, we don't have that. Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, who is it now? Is it Nancy Supreme? Then you have Minister of Law and Justice, Minister of Tribal Affairs, and so on. Now, we have we have two Ministers of Finance, they have two as well. As the Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, two ministries, but held by one minister, the same minister, holding two related ministries. And you go further down, you can see some parts that actually have more than ours. For example, we have Minister of Transport and Works. They have Minister of Road Transport and Highways, Minister of Shipping, Minister of Railways, Minister of Civil Aviation, and so on. And you have four ministers here, but Road Transport and Highway Minister also covers shipping. And also you go further down, he covers rural development as well. So the same way you go, and I won't go into detail because I'm going to show you the summary. If I go to the bottom, Malaysia, as I said earlier, we have 37 ministerial positions, but only 35 ministers. In India, they have 36 ministerial positions, but only 23 ministers. Okay, and the other ministers are always cheaper because they get allowance, they don't get salary. Next. So how can other countries work with much fewer ministers than we do? So there's a comparison between Malaysia and Australia. In terms of population, theirs is 80% of ours. In terms of ministry, you find that ours is 26. But the ministry here, I count Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister as if like they're individual ministry, independent from the PM department. And in Australia, 22. Number of ministerial positions, I showed you just now, 37 and 22. Number of ministers, 35 and 13. How does all this gap come about? The last two rows give you the answer. How many ministers, how many ministries in Malaysia that has more than one minister? 3. The Department of Prime Minister has 10 ministers, including the 2 new additions. And they have 1 more deputy minister. You know what does it mean? It means that they can form a football team and go and contest. How many ministers then have more than one ministry to take care of? 2. The first one is called Najib Razak. He holds the finance ministry as well. The second one is called Muhyiddin Yassin, who holds the education ministry. What about in Australia? In Australia, every ministry can only have 1 minister. But you have also 3 ministers who take care more than one ministry, excluding the Prime Minister himself. If you remember, it's the Deputy Prime Minister, the Attorney General, and the Minister of Health and Sport. Next, please. This is India. Now, Indian population is 40 times ours. The number of ministry actually more than ours. There are 36 of them. We have only 26. The ministerial positions, however, is only 36. Exactly the same. While ours is 37 because we have 10 in the Prime Minister Department and 2 in the Finance and Education Ministry. Now, we come down to ministries, number of ministers, we beat them, hand down, 35 to 53. The number of ministry with more than one minister is 0. Every ministry has only one minister. So a simple change of command. But they have 7 ministers who hold more than one ministry. And unlike in Australia, they are not talking about 2 ministries. Some of them hold 3 ministries. And this is not just a recent additions by Modi. His predecessor, Manmohan Singh's cabinet has 29 ministers and 7 with multiple portfolios. So it's a tradition in India that is common for ministers to hold more than one portfolio. Not everyone, of course. These are the senior ministers, people who are more capable, more experienced to deal with more than one portfolios. The question comes back here. Why is these things important? When we have minister, more than one minister for one ministry, that's a sign for us to check. Is that meant to create jobs for politicians? Because why do you need 2 heads in a department? Why do we actually need 2 ministers for finance and education? You can have a deputy minister. Why do you need 2 ministers, one for the first minister and then the second minister? The only explanation is that the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister want to hold on to another ministry. And yet, they cannot run it on their own. So they have someone answerable to them. In that sense, you are looking at not only a 10-minister department of Prime Minister, both of them together actually control another 2 more ministries. Now, I'm not going into details of Prime Minister Department because I've read and heard Chin Tong talk about that a lot, so that's his forte. I leave it to him. How many agencies under our PMD and how they actually become the actual mini cabinet. The actual cabinet that makes the decision. So I leave that to him. So what I want to say is that that's where you can see. This is actually creations of jobs. But the second part is really that what makes us have more ministers than India. In India, you have 7 ministers, including the Prime Minister himself. They don't have a deputy, holding more than one portfolio. In Malaysia, only the Prime Minister and his deputy. Why is this important? If you want a smaller cabinet, you would have ministers holding multiple portfolios. As simple as that. Because you may have in that ministry, but that ministry need not to have a full-time minister exclusively dealing with that. Some ministry can be complementary in their functional nature. So you could actually combine them. If you insist of every minister can only hold one portfolio, then again it points to us. Is it because you want to create more jobs so that you can buy off more of your party colleagues in the parliament? There's also another reason why you will not see a 7 over there. Is by allowing senior minister controlling more ministry, having a smaller cabinet, the Prime Minister power, other things being equal, is checked. It's a very simple reason. You have less minister, it's much easier for them to strike a consensus, for them to speak up. You have many ministers, especially, let's say, at the moment, we're talking about 10 out of 35 ministers are in the Prime Minister department. If you count both of them in the Prime Minister and his deputy, and the 2 second ministers in Finance and Education Ministry, you're talking about 14 out of 35. It's more than 1/3. That's a very serious question. In a Westminster Parliament, you have the difference between front bench and back bench. Front bench are tied down by their job to support the government all the time. Because if you're not happy, you quit. That's as simple as that. And that's what Vietnamiti did. Not happy, you cannot bear the collective responsibility, you go. The backbenchers are supposedly having a little bit more room to rebel. So you have a term called backbench reward. So you can actually come from the same party, but you want to pull down your government, you want to embarrass your government, you choose not to vote for or you want to vote against. Now, in Malaysia, you never have that case. But from 2008 onwards, it's very possible for you to have backbench rewards that put down the government by crossing the floor. So, the calculation is real, that the Prime Minister may be buying off his party colleagues by offering them ministerial positions with power and perks. Now, does anyone know what's the chances now of a BN MP to be appointed as a minister or deputy minister? It's 2 out of 5. So every 5 BN MP, 2 of them will get a chance to be a front bench member. We're talking about serious proliferation here. Next, please. So, summing up my point, the proliferations of public offices, one problem that directly would create is underemployment of public officials. What does it mean? You create more jobs than what is necessary. I'm sure you have seen our JKR sometimes when they dig out the hole and so on, right? There'll be one people digging out hole, the other people looking at them, and then other people supervising the one who dig and the one who look at them. That's what they call underemployment. They do not appear as unemployed because they get a job. But the job is actually artificial. Now, how do we know that this is happening? The best part is that you do not see actually an increase of government business. The addition of the cabinet is not because the government has decided to take on more businesses, but it's actually to split the existing businesses to more ministers. If it can be handled earlier by a smaller size of members of minister, why do we need more ministers now? This is underemployment. You're creating jobs to buy off your coalition partners. Now, I started off by making it very clear, I'm not suggesting an utopian country where Prime Minister just pick the most able to serve the nation. There's always a cost that you have to consider by alienating popular politicians even though they may not be capable. So I put that into the equation. What I'm questioning is that if you want to add new people in, you must drop some. You cannot just add and not drop. You cannot transfer the cost to the public. And my second point is that, as I mentioned earlier, the larger the numbers of the minister, it's actually the harder for them to organize, to reach a consensus, and therefore to check on the Prime Minister. This is actually a very important point I want to run from. There's actually a load of literature on this called problem of collective action and political science. Because the more people you have, it's harder for you to cooperate. So whenever you have a bloated institution, someone stands to gain. That's the boss. Because the subordinates cannot organize themselves effectively. So your cabinet will be a rubber stamp to the Prime Minister. Okay. So that's then, what about the realms of job creation here? What are the things that we have seen? The civil service, we already know this. Underemployment, we all know very well, because every time the government worry that they're going to be kicked out by unemployed voters, they create jobs. We have seen in the cabinet of executive, but also in parliament. Next. I want to stress this because that too often we forget about the big picture. Now, how big should our parliament be? We have been told and indoctrinated by our politicians that whenever you have more babies, 20 years later, 21 years later, you must have more MPs. But that's actually not the case for normal countries. We are very unique in holding that kind of debate. What you should really consider the size of the parliament should be how effective the parliament can function. How good is the quality of representation? So they themselves, that question, the size, is a question in itself that warrants a consideration. Not looking and saying how many seats I can win, because that consideration is one of electoral college. It's counting and saying how can I establish a government. Now, to go a bit faster, in year 2012, our lower house met for 68 days, or specifically 560 hours and 58 minutes. What does it mean? Divided by 222 MPs, each of them has had 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 37 seconds to speak. Now that's average. You always know some people took more time than others. So that means that always some MPs will have even less than 2 hours in an entire year to speak. Now, Parliament, the whole idea of Parliament is for you to deliberate. And you can't deliberate in silence. If you're going to increase the numbers of seats, other things being equal, that basically means that you're going to have more MPs, so each of them can speak less. It doesn't make sense at all, right? Because in Parliament, definitely silence cannot be golden. Next, please. Now, but this question has been skipped all the way. I'll show you what happened here. In the past, we have re-evaluation taking place before the numbers of parliamentary seats was changed. All you need to do is look at, let's say, Peninsula and Labuan. That happened in 2003. The process started in 2002, August the 8th. Forget about the detail, you can ask me later. When it was finalized, when it became law, it was May the 1st in 2003. So in 2003, in law, in Peninsula, you have 165 seats. Now, that was not a number in the Constitution, because Article 46, which determines the numbers of seats, will not change until August the 14th. And the same thing, you can look at Sabah and Sarawak. What does it mean here? It basically means that the Parliament made a decision on how the shape and the composition of the constituency, without thinking and arguing and debating in the first place how many parliamentarians we should have. It is like the same question we have now in Cabinet Reshuffle. We are asking and saying how many parties getting how many seats. in the cabinet and not asking actually how big the cabinet is. You are putting the cart before the horse. How could this happen? A simple explanation to this issue, because to me it's symptomatic of the entire thing, is that we have a political system that creates jobs to overcome political competition. In a normal country, you should look at pre-1962. We have 3 questions: total seats, interstate apportion, home districting. In a normal country, you would consider the size on its own of the entire parliament. Then the election commission would decide how many seats a state would have, and then how is the state carved into the numbers of seats constituency. That's a normal country. In Malaysia, after 1973, the parliament basically has its power expanded. In a sense, the Article 46 will spell out in full, not just the total numbers of seats, but how many seats each state and federal territory you have. And the EC is left with the power to redelineate based on the numbers of seats. And there's a tricky part here. For you to change Article 46, you need 2/3, just like any other provisions, most provisions in the Constitution. But redelineation needs only half. At the moment, is 111 to pass. In practice, what had happened just now is the other way around. The election commission took the first step, get it passed in the parliament, and then the parliament rubber stamped it by approving the amendment to Article 46. So the size of the parliament was amended without a deliberation on that question itself. It's decided by the partisan calculations of how many seats the party will get. Now, to me, this is wrong. You can add seats, but you must go by the process. The people must have the chance to hear how many seats we have in the parliament and how many seats that goes to each of the states. And not know that on that day, when EC announced it, put it on your gazette, and then you go in, and by then you have 30 days to worry about your redelineation, and no time to worry about the size of the parliament. Next, please. So my question to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that should we just have more jobs for the politicians? That's the question we really should ask. I'm sure that my fellow panelists would go into whether individual ministers are doing their jobs or not, but what I want to take this chance as a first speaker to invite you to consider about these questions. Now that's what I mean by underemployment. Can you see that? One person is fixing, you have 6 persons looking at that. That's basically what happened to our cabinet and our parliament. Because the political class is creating jobs for themselves. The EC become employment commissions for politicians, and the cabinet become a job creation office for politicians in the ruling coalition. With that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Huat. I think you have asked some very loaded questions, which is to say that the biggest question now is how many ministers does it take to change a light bulb? I hope that is not something we're going to leave alone. We want to discuss this in a very serious manner, and we would like a response. And it's not just us speaking to ourselves and between ourselves. I would like to invite Dr. Liew to respond on this issue and to give his comments. Thank you.
Thank you for today, MCs. A very good evening to ladies and gentlemen, all the Saudara-Saudaris over here. I feel a bit lonely today because as the panel members all beside me, I think I'm the only one from Malaysian National. YB is from DAP, and I believe that you are.
I'm from Penang Institute, which is state government institute.
State government, okay, never mind. In fact, well, I'm trying to say that before I proceed, I just want to do some corrections. I am no longer in UCSI. I left UCSI. In fact, I resigned from UCSI, and then I went for the general elections of last year general elections. So, in fact, today I would like to say why I'm standing middle, because half of my person belongs to politicians, because I'm the vice president of the party Gerakan. Half also going to the academicians, because I'm teaching in University Technology Malaysia. So today my findings and my sharing will be a hybrid between these two. Okay, yes, when I received this title, Cabinet Reshuffle, will the new ministers be effective or not? As academicians, when we look at the terms reshuffle, I'm trying to look at the dictionary, what it means, what it defines as a reshuffle. So, according to Oxford, not my definition, Oxford is interchange the positions of members of a team, especially of the government of the ministers. So this is the reshuffle definitions. But to me, reshuffle, the output of the reshuffle, it can be increase of the minister, or decrease, or maintain. These are the three outputs on the reshuffling. But if you ask me or not, is it the reshuffling on this, on the Najib and the Prime Ministers, when recently he just announced, is it a reshuffling? In fact, I don't think so. I quite agree with Dr. Wong mentioned that it's more on the expansions. It's more on expansions. But to a certain extent, I also have to agree a little bit, because on the reshuffling, at least the Ministry of Transport, that time is headed by Hishamuddin, but now it's by Liew Chin Tong, so a little bit changes, so a little bit reshufflings over there. But my stand is, yes, I agree. First thing first is the expansions. And second, I also agree that the ministers, the performance of the governments must be based on the performance and the effectiveness of the ministers, not the quantity, definitely. Because nowadays we are talking about the quality, so that's why the performance and the effectiveness of the ministers will be more important than the quantity of the ministers that we have over here. But I will look at the reasons, sort of like expansions of the cabinets by the prime ministers. I believe that we have to go back to the basics. Why this reshuffling happened, or why these expansions happens. So to me, first thing first, in fact, you look at it, I think everybody should know also, nowadays we are talking about the reshufflings of the cabinet. In fact, it's adding the ministers from MCA and from my party, from Gerakan, isn't it? So from MCA, I have to bring you all back why there's a reshuffling on the cabinets. Because first thing first, you still remember in 2011, the year of 2011 and 2012, MCA during their AGM, they already mentioned that if the results of the general elections of 13 is worse than the GE 12, they are not going to take any appointment or positions from the government. This is their AGM decisions. Okay? And then furthermore, after that, after the GE 13, I think everybody know, in MCA, we left 7-11, and that's why I remember very well, so 7-11, 7 Member of Parliament, 11 Aduns. Even though I laugh, but it's better than Gerakan. Gerakan is only left 1 MP only that time. So then on the May 15, Najib formed the new cabinets. So when they formed the new cabinets, if you still can recall, a lot of issues will happen from MCA. Example, the Dato' T. Siu King, Kyong from the Johor. he accepted the appointment as the EXCO of the Johor. So that's why issue been raised again. MCA is trying to come out with the EGM in the year of 2013, in the October. So in their EGM, I think their resolution is they can accept only state and the local government positions, but not federal. This is in the October last year. And then furthermore, this year in February, under the leaderships of the Liew Chin Tong, they already accepting all the appointments or all the positions already. So this is the reasons why the sort of like the reshufflings of the candidates been invited Liew Chin Tong and Wee Ka Siong as the ministers in the cabinets. So this is the basis of the MCA. Okay. In terms of Gerakan, I think everybody still can remember clearly. Recently, we just had our by-elections in Telok Intan, and during the by-elections, I still remember on the 29th of May, the Prime Minister is already announced if the candidate, I mean my president, Dato' Mahathir Mohamad, if he won the by-elections, he will be appointed as the ministers of the cabinets. So that's why in this cabinet reshuffle, MCA will be coming because of the EGM, and Gerakan presidents coming in is because of the promises being done by the Prime Ministers because he won the by-elections. Okay, so this is the basis of the what is happening on the reshuffling. But a lot of people ask me, Dominic, are you happy on this reshuffling or not? Be frank with you, I'm not so happy because it's on expansion, it's not reshuffling. If reshuffling means that some minister will be taken up from the cabinet, isn't it? So at least my president have a chance to have a portfolio, not a prime minister, minister in the prime minister department. So that's why, in fact, I will say that this is the transition stage. I will say this will be fulfilling the promises by the prime ministers, and also because of the MCA case, that's why there's a reshuffling. Back to the questions, just now Dr. Wong showed you the Australia, how many ministers, how many ministries they have and all this. But to me, there must be a measurement. I'm not quite agree with Dr. Wong saying that the population is not, have no relationship with the number of the ministers. I think it's important because minister is, of course, manage the country, but manage the country consists of what? Consists of all the rakyat. Rakyat is who? All is the people over here. So there must be some relationships between the number of ministers and also the populations. For example, we can see the doctor and patients ratio. There must be, whether if you ask me, say, hey Malaysia, do you have enough medical doctor or not? Do we have enough or not? Or more than enough? Don't know. There must be a ratio, there must be a measurement. So in WHO, recommended one medical doctor, at least in the country, they can treat at least 600 patients. So that's why this is the ratio that they have. Then in fact, in the university also the same. We are talking about the ratios of the lecturers versus the students. So there must be a measurement. So that's why if you ask me whether our number of ministers is too many in Malaysia or not, it's a question mark. We really have to look at different perspectives. So I'm trying to look at, Dr. Wong wants to look at the angle on what? On the number of ministers and the portfolio of the ministries. Then as an academician, I also have to do some homework first. So that's why I look at the number of ministers and the populations of the countries. So when I look at it, a lot of people say Sweden have 21 ministers. 21. Is it many? I don't know. But then you look at their population, only 9 million. 9 million orang saja, but we have 21 ministers. Look at Singapore, our close friends. They have 18 ministers, 5.4 million people only over there. So that's why if you say the number of ministers control the most many people in that country, then you have to salute to the China. China has the populations of the 1.3 billion people, but only 20 ministers only. But is it true or not? So there's reason why there must be a measurement, must be there. So I quite agree that, as I say, you don't really, there must be a standard, must be a measurement that we have to do it in order to see whether it is enough or not. So that's why I will say, if you look at Thailand, they have 35 ministers, but their population is 67 million. So, based on these calculations, our Malaysia one is one minister take care of 0.85 million people. 0.85. Okay, this is if you compare to, if you want to choose from Sri Lanka, for your information, you tahu berapa minister dia? 67, 67. But the population is 20 million. Okay, so that's why I would say that there must be the measurements that need to be carried out. Global average of ministers they found from the Google. Sometimes Google also have to help us to do this type of jobs. It's around 30. It's around 30 ministers. So this is some background of the number of ministers that we have over here. And the reason reshuffling over here, if you ask me or not, whether it's effective or not, I mean, it's too early to tell whether the minister is effective or not, because it's just on board. You really have to give them time to perform. Then we only can say that it's good or it's not good, or is it effective or it's not effective. I didn't give them some time. But then I would say that with these additional ministers put in these reshufflings of the cabinets, I would say the first positive point I would say is last time in cabinet is there's only one Chinese thing. One Chinese, and then with additionals with Liew Chin Tong, Ma Siu Kiong, and Wee Ka Siong, so it become additional 3 Chinese. So total we have 4 Chinese here. So then you might be asking me, is it important whether you need to have more Chinese, more Indian, more Malay, and all this? To me, balancing of the ratios is important. Because you really, whether you like it or not, our Malaysia is multi-racial. We have a Malay, we have a Chinese, we have an Indian, we have the oral caste and all this. But you look at the current cabinets that we have, it consists of all races. And it same applies to Penang also. And I look at the Penang CM is a Chinese, the Deputy CM is Indian, another one is Malay. So it's a combination of, and it is important also in over here. So I will say that adding the Chinese ministers, this is a plus point I can see it over here. But another one I would like to see is, this might be a lot of people do not know, but I just want to share over here. In Barisan Nasional, we are trying to get all, if possible, try to get almost all the representatives from each component parties. So this is the consensus that we have, and everything decisions we have to make, the Barisan Nasional we have to make, then all these party leaders will have to give their point of view and then come up with the decisions. So that's why by adding in, inviting MCA and Parti Gerakan join the cabinet, this is one of the reasons also because of the Barisan spirit. In terms of quantity, yes, I also don't agree that now from the Prime Minister's departments increase until we have 10 ministers over there. But whether is it effective or not, these 10 ministers, it really depends on which perspective you look at it. As you all know that all the ministers, now how many we have? 35. 35 total. Well, why do you remember so clearly? 35, all the ministers we have. But they are meeting each other every Wednesday. Every Wednesday. So whether you like it or not, all these ministers will bring up all their issues, their complaints that they receive, and trying to make the decisions where other people cannot make. So that's why all the ministers, they have the number of the ministers, they are trying to meet every Wednesday to discuss and to debate and to make decisions for the countries. So that's why they're meeting up quite frequently. So this meeting up to me is positive. As long as you have representative inside, so a lot of the issues can be settled. So recently, I think we have issues on the oopsies teachers problem, isn't it? So also, as I say, today newspaper already announced this will be solved through the cabinet decisions. But sometimes we also don't know, even though cabinet decisions also can be turned off. The one we have to discuss in some other days. But then, as I say, the number of the ministers try to look at the positive perspective. That means with more ministers there, better decisions they can make and better point of views can be raised during the cabinet meetings. And by adding in the Wee Ka Siong's, Liew Tong Lai, and also my presidents in as the party, as in the cabinets, I would say that it might be sometimes sharpened more on the focus that they have. For example, you let Wee Ka Siong to be in charge of the SME of the Chinese, all the Chinese village and all this. I would say that based on their experience, they can reflect better pictures during the cabinet meetings. So that's why these are the few positive points that I would like to share, that try to look at the positive points. I don't think that, like Dr. Wong showed the pictures, one minister is working, 6 of them are looking at. I don't think that this happened in Malaysia. But then I will look at a more positive point of view that more issues, more problems can be solved. So that's why I would like to conclude that it's quite unfair to say about whether the minister, additional 3 ministers and additional 3 deputy ministers, is it effective or not? It's too early to tell. But I will say that give them more time. Give them to prove to you they are able to do so. Thank you very much. Thank you.